He hit one shot last evening and he said, there you are, you're back. They wear it like a badge, or we were down there in the dumps and that's not the kind of character he is. This is what they predicted, these idiots. And look what happened with the cricket eventually.
Yeah. A dream start for Stark in Australia.
Goes down the ground, an authority stroke from Kohli. Man around the bat, the Indians have shown they're prepared to use their feet.
Welcome to the Australians' preview of the first test of this Border-Gavaskar Trophy series. It starts on Friday in Perth. I'm joined by Bharat Sundaresan, Australians' chief columnist, I guess you would call yourself.
I guess so. Cricket columnist is what I go by these days, Ben Horne. So.
And Australia vs India series is kind of your absolute specialty. And do you think we're in for a really special series this summer?
Well, the last time India were here, I ended up writing a book about that series, and it was probably one of the most dramatic series we have ever witnessed on these shores. Will this be equally dramatic? Well, at least we are not battling the COVID crisis, so there are no protocols, and there are a lot of Indian journalists who will be traveling for this. We don't have to worry about Ravi Shastri not walking or not wearing a mask as he walks around the various cricket stadiums. I think there's so much intrigue about this series already, Ben. But even before, I guess, we get into the nitty-gritty of who's going to play and what the pitch is going to be like and what to expect from the weather in Perth and where the two teams are stacked, I guess it makes sense for us to talk about how this rivalry's become what it is now, right? And it's quite something to think about how it used to be even till the 90s, where India come here, play 5 test matches in 91, 92, the last time these two teams played 5 tests against each other. And then they're not even invited to come to Australia for 8 years. So they had to wait till 99, 2000. And if you were born in the late 90s, you would think that's unthinkable because these days, and I did the math the other day, if it's called doing the math, I think since 2007, there have been 2 years in all where India and Australia haven't played some sort of bilateral cricket against each other, and to think how it's changed in this century.
They know each other very well.
Very well.
And Bharat, there's so many talking points coming into this series. Let's start with India because they're coming off a 3-0 defeat to New Zealand at home, which is just a result that no one expected. And it's kind of been compounded by the fact that they're a bit all over the place in terms of their player availability. Captain Rohit Sharma is yet to arrive in Australia. He will not play this test match, so they'll have an interim captain. Shubman Gill, who was either going to open the batting or bat number 3, he's out, we believe, with a thumb injury. So it really, and plus Mohammad Shami obviously not here either at this point. So it's not the strongest looking Indian side on paper. But we didn't think that last time either when they won in Australia with a team in the 4th test that barely resembled the team they ran out with in the 1st test. But it seems like so much of it is going to fall on Virat Kohli, who his performances have been declining last couple of years. Is there one more masterful show, do you think, in store from Virat Kohli in Australia?
And I think it'll come down to that. It'll have to be one of those leaders in this side. He's no longer captain, of course, who'll have to put their hand up and make a series of this for India. And people remember that last series 4 years ago so differently. They talk about how it ended, and who India had left in the ranks and had to play Natarajan and Washington Sundar. But they started that series with a full strength squad. The only major guy missing was Ishant Sharma, who was still on the circuit at that point. And it's weird how these things kind of come full circle, right? At that point, the whole talk was, okay, Virat Kohli is coming, but he's about to become a father. How many test matches is he going to play? And we found out he left after the first test. And here we are 4 years later, it's the other captain, Rohit Sharma, the new captain, who's just become a father, and he's missing the first test. But they'll have him for 4 of the 5 test matches, which is very important for an Indian team, like you said, which sort of looks in a bit of disarray. And there are the guys missing. You mentioned there's no Rohit. So Shubman Gill copped a blow to the thumb while taking a catch at the WACA during their match simulation. So he's there. You go. And Ben, in his honor, has also like put a little strap on his own.
Just
thumb.
try to put myself in Shubman's
Yeah,
shoes.
true. Just to feel like that's why he's the best in the business. Benny's the best because he wants to experience what these athletes he writes about are experiencing. So it happened on the same day as well, by the way. I've heard from reliable sources the injuries to Gill and Horne. So no Shubman Gill, no Mohammad Shami. So it's almost a makeshift top three. We were at the Optus Stadium earlier today, and from what I've seen, it looks pretty certain that India will open with KL Rahul and Yashasvi Jaiswal, who we're all waiting to see on these shores. He's scored over 1,000 test runs already, has Jaiswal in this calendar year, is about to break the record for most sixes in a calendar year as well. KL Rahul, for the last 2-3 years, has been really touted as a middle order batter. He made his debut in Australia 10 years ago, but now he's back to open because their hand is forced. I don't think they trust the one other specialist opener that they brought, Abhimanyu Ishwaran, for the job at this moment. So, and at number 3 is going to be someone who wasn't even in the test squad till 3 days ago. Like, it was the Shubman Gill injury that led to Devdutt Padikkal being held back, and now it looks like Padikkal will bat number 3. So it's all happening with that Indian batting order, and batting at 6 in all likelihood will be Dhruv Jurel, who is a reserve wicketkeeper, and he flies in early alongside KL Rahul for the India A game against Australia A, the second one at the MCG, impresses everyone. And now he's going to bat as a specialist batter. And all of this is happening before the series even starts. And as we now know, it will be Jasprit Bumrah captaining the Indian side with a bowling attack which will have experience. You'd expect Jadeja to be there and probably even R. Ashwin. Mohammad Siraj making his debut last time around, so he'll add some weight to it. But it's still an Indian team which probably 4 weeks ago, if you had asked anyone in world cricket, you would have thought they would have come here almost as equal favourites for the series. But now just look all over the place with a lot of question marks over a lot of spots in that batting lineup or the team lineup.
And while that's true, the intriguing thing about the series is that there's some question marks over Australia as well. So obviously all the debate leading into the series was about who would open the batting. That question was finally answered last week with Nathan McSweeney named to make his test debut. Looking forward to that. That's obviously all come about because Cameron Green is out for the summer, and in its own way that really changes the dynamic of the Australian team, makes them a bit more one-dimensional without Green there. So it's a different looking Australian lineup. There's some batsmen there who haven't been at their best now for 12 months, so there's some pressure there. But yeah, what do you like about Nathan McSweeney, Bharat? You mentioned Jaiswal. Nudgee College, not exactly the same path to Test cricket that Jaiswal, living in a tent on the side of the field was. But he's worked so hard for it in his own way, and he's got a good presence about him. I think they really like his character. He's a natural leader. And he has put the runs on the board to start the summer.
I mean, even before we start talking about his cricket in a loud and clear voice, can we just say good things happen to good people who move to Adelaide? Like there is one living example here. I might be really kind of challenging the whole concept of good people by referring to myself as one, but that's not my job.
That's fair enough. Yeah,
I was fishing for that one, Benny. But Nathan McSweeney, look, I interviewed Brendan Doggett, former Queensland fast bowler who also moved to South Australia, because I just wanted to know more about McSweeney, the person. We can talk about the cricket first. He moved to South Australia 3 years ago. He played 5 first-class games for Queensland, averaged 15. So he wanted a fresh start. He was just 22. And year after year, his performances have improved. And he's now got 6 first-class hundreds. 5 of those came in victories for South Australia. And his first major knock was 99 not out against New South Wales at the Karen Rolton Oval, winning South Australia their first Shield, or giving them their first Shield win in 2 years. So he's done a lot of good things for South Australian cricket. And that average has gone from 15 when he moved to South Australia only 3 years ago. We're not talking about someone who's been around for a long time, to now in the late 30s. And he's won over everyone in the dressing room. And speaking to Brendan Doggett, what stood out for me was he seems like the guy that everyone loves. He brings out the best in everyone else. He always wants the best for everyone. A couple of anecdotes that really kind of warmed my heart were, they moved together. So Nathan McSweeney's always lived with his family. He's in a happy environment. So it was tough for him to move. So Brendan Doggett, much older than him, or 5 years older than him, they kind of warm to each other. They decide, okay, if we move, we'll move together and move in with each other. And that's when Brendan Doggett realizes, I have to do everything. This kid doesn't know how to look for a house or what the concept of paying rent is. But then they had this beautiful brotherly bond. And another thing he said was, so when Doggett's fiance then did move to Adelaide, and she was 8 months pregnant, and Nathan McSweeney had become such a part of the family, he continued living with them. But at one point, by which time he's already been playing for South Australia for a while, he had to take a call. He said, look, I don't want to be a hindrance. So he just moves into this tiny unit in Adelaide. It's so tiny that he can't even fit his refrigerator inside. But again, that tells you a lot about this kid. He's still just 25. And there's so much to like about him, both on and off the field. And obviously, he's a Manas clone. And as we found out today, Manas saw him for the first time at 11 years old. So no wonder there is so much of Manas in the way Nathan McSweeney goes about his batting.
Amazing, yeah. Is there a key player that you see for the Australian side on the bowling side of things? I mean, we saw when India won here in 2020-2021, probably Nathan Lyon's effectiveness in the final two tests, India were able to get on top of him. And then we saw in the Ashes with Nathan Lyon injured that was the turning point of that series. To me, it feels like Nathan Lyon is sort of the key man here, even though we know how dangerous Australia's quicks are. But what's Australia going to have to do right in a bowling sense to win this series?
I think personally for Lyon, you go back 4 years. He starts the series with 390 wickets. He was about to play his 97th test. That was the Adelaide one. So it was all designed in a way. Obviously, he'll go to 400 wickets before he gets to the fourth test, which was supposed to be his 100th test match. And there would be this crowning moment for him. But as we found out, he ended with 399 wickets. So he took 9 wickets across 4 test matches. Tim Payne, as he's said since, wasn't at his best as a keeper, and probably also let Nathan Lyon down, both in Sydney and Brisbane, catches and stumpings. And, there's that heartbreaking moment where India have won the series, so it's glory, glory India. But Ajinkya Rahane, being the nice guy he always was, got the Indian team to sign a T-shirt and presented it to Nathan Lyon for his 100th test. But you can kind of imagine what it must have felt like for Nathan Lyon. He would have had mixed feelings, obviously. It was a bittersweet moment for him. So he has this could be the series where he gets his own back, because it's been quite a battle, Nathan Lyon versus India in Australia. Because go back 10 years, 2014 Adelaide, that emotional test match after the passing of Philip Hughes. That was the first time Nathan Lyon took 5 wickets in the 4th innings and also ended up winning a test match for Australia. So it came at a crucial moment in Nathan Lyon's career. And the subsequent 2 trips where India have won, they have won largely because they've been able to kind of negate the Lyon challenge. So you're absolutely right. Well, the focus will be on the 3 big fast bowlers who look fired up. And I've never seen Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark look fresher for a home summer than they did yesterday at the Wacker. So great signs for Australia. But I think Nathan Lyon will have a big say on this series, and so he should. And I think as much as we speak about the Australian bowling, the one person they will be happy not to see in the Indian lineup, and the guy who's really held them at bay, is Cheteshwar Pujara. And I think the Pujara factor we'll speak about a lot as the series progresses, especially if it goes the way we think it will, where the Indian batters will struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Rishabh Pant, Bharat, he was obviously in the end, he was the star of the show when India won 3 or 4 years ago. But since then, he's had this horrific car accident that he's recovered from. What an amazing story he is. And, do you see him as the key for this Indian team if he can get on top of Australia's bowling?
Even before we again get into his cricket, but I seem to do that a lot. Just last night, I just spent a couple of days in India in early August shooting some stuff on Rishabh Pant and going to the site where the accident happened and the state the car was in, speaking to people who were first responders. And then last night to see him speeding on an e-scooter, heading in my direction and kind of giving me a hug, it all felt like a little surreal. I was like, aren't you supposed to not be on a vehicle of any kind after the accident that you survived? But that's just Rishabh Pant in a nutshell. Tim Payne always says, we all want to play cricket the way Rishabh Pant wants to play or does play.
Yeah.
There's that enjoyment to everything Rishabh does. And I think he will, like he was 4 years ago and 6 years ago, will be the X factor, because there are a lot of Indian batters of high quality. We all know what to expect from. But Rishabh's the guy who can, really take games away from the opposition. He was the one highlight of that New Zealand series for India, to be honest, that forgettable whitewash, and he will just do what Rishabh does. And I almost get a feeling, just from little I've seen of him after he came back into the international side, he seems to be playing with even more gay abandon than before. I guess that happens when you survive an accident, the kinds that he did.
Bharat, no one watches net training quite like you. You don't miss a thing in the nets. There's some pressure on Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith coming into this series as outstanding batsmen who perhaps over the last period have been a bit patchy. Not, they haven't completely fallen off a cliff by any means, but just their performances have been more inconsistent than what we've become used to. In what you've seen so far here in Perth, what are you seeing from them in the nets? Do you think that they're going to start this summer in their best form?
My first summer date with both Manas and Steve happened at the Adelaide Oval before the ODI. So even though they were facing the white ball, that was my first sighting of them for the summer. So I spent 2 days watching them in the nets. And firstly, Steve Smith, I don't want to put the mockers on him, but there is just something about Steve Smith this summer. It's not just the hunger. Probably it's getting his number 4 position back. But everything seems to be working the way he wants it to work. And like you said, the net whispering and all of that. I have developed a unique kind of, in my head, an insight into Steve Smith. And when he starts saying good things about his batting to himself while he's batting in the nets, that's a good sign. There was one stint in Adelaide when he walked back into the nets, and he was at times, like he does, commentating his own batting, and he was paying himself some great tributes, and which is a great sign for Australia, which means his hands are moving the way that he wants them to move, the feet are moving the way he wants them to move, the head's moving the way he wants it to move, and everything just sounds very sweet. Even yesterday at the WACA, we obviously couldn't see them practice today. The practice was washed off, but even at the WACA yesterday, I was there till the bitter end, like he was there till the bitter end, and I think things are falling into place. And he hit one shot last evening and he said, there you are, you're back. And again, Steve Smith is back, I feel, and he'll want to, he's had like his some great summers against India, and he would want to finish what will be his last summer against India on Australian soil in Test cricket on a high. Manas, on the other hand, I think he's still working towards getting his game where he wants it to be. I think it's a pity in a way, where I really thought his batting had come together the way he wants to in Christchurch. He makes that 90 and then he has to wait 9 months for his next test. So I think for Manas's sake, he needs a score at the start of the series so that he can kind of like not be too anxious about everything that's going on with his technique, or he thinks is going on in his technique, and he can feel a little more settled. If he does do that, we could see the summer of Manas and Steve once again, and I'm pretty confident of that. This is the net whisperer speaking.
Just gonna check.
Yeah.
Just to
25 minutes ago.
Okay, that's good. It's 19 minutes.
All right.
Sorry, I was just afraid that it had stopped recording, but it's still going.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is there any other points I can sort of throw to you on to finish?
So I guess like we've spoken about the ins and outs. Maybe like just like because it's the first test, like the enormity. Like, so what is this going to be received like? Probably like how important this
is the first test.
Yeah, I mean the India-Australia, is it what the Ashes is or whatever, that
Okay,
that
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
where do you think it ranks or whatever, and we
Yeah.
can both not just me, you're not
Yeah.
interviewing me,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
can both have our say, you can give I can give the global perspective, you can give the Australian perspective, I guess, where do you think, how important is it for CA and look everything that they're doing,
Yeah.
changing demographic, all that will be
Yeah.
good, I think.
And Bharat, we know how big the Border-Gavaskar series has become for both countries, and I think for Australia, this one is the biggest ever,
Yeah.
because they're coming off 2 straight losses at home to India, which was an unthinkable sort of situation when it happened once, let alone a second time in a row when Australia had Steve Smith and David Warner back for that series as well. So to lose this series against India at home, I think would have fairly major consequences for this Australian team, and some older, experienced players who probably have thoughts about going on another 12 months to play England next year. If this series did not go well for Australia, that may well not happen. That may not happen, and changes may need to be made sooner. So I really think there's a lot riding on this for Australia. The first test for them is so important, as it is for India. First test always so important in a series, but I think if Australia can put an emphatic win on the board straight away, I think they can sort of take the wind out of India's sails a little bit, and suddenly, 5 tests looks like a long time for India to be here. But we know last time, of course, Australia bowling India out for 36 in Adelaide, and we thought, this is going to be one-way traffic, and then everything turned in Melbourne in the next test. So we know there's always so many twists and turns. One thing we know about this matchup now is how well the players know each other. The IPL has really brought these guys so close that they know each other's games so intimately. And I suppose the biggest factor now for Australia is they're dealing with an Indian team that's just not afraid to be here. They've already conquered those demons that had held them down in Australia for so long. So from that point of view, Australia, I guess, that they've lost that intimidation factor that they always held over visiting teams, particularly India. How do you see it from an Indian point of view? Obviously, India at the moment, they have that benefit of having won the last 2 times here. But I suppose most recently they've given up that Test championship.
Yes.
And that's another factor in this series. But yeah, what's this series mean for India?
I mean, firstly, we're recording this on November 19th, which I think is a day that no longer exists in India, because people don't think about November 19th because it's a reminder that that's the day Australia beat them at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad, and Travis Head played one of the great one-day knocks. Because that day kind of brings back a lot of bad memories, and people are still mourning what happened that famous night, if you're an Australian fan or an Australian cricket supporter, but not so much for India. And look, you're right. Even though they have won back-to-back series here, that came under a different team management. That was Ravi Shastri. And for me, one of the most intriguing aspects of the series is what happens behind the scenes. They have a new coach in Gautam Gambhir who comes with not a lot of coaching experience. He's a very different personality to Ravi Shastri. If say India lose badly in Perth, I can't imagine Gambhir going out and saying, they wear it like a badge, or we were down there in the dumps and that's not the kind of character he is. He has his own strengths, which are very different to what Ravi Shastri brought to the table. So I'm very intrigued to see how that dynamic plays out. But when you talk about what it means for the senior players in the Australian team, if you look across both teams, this is also an end of an era kind of series, because this will be the last time we get to see Virat Kohli here, Nathan Lyon against India. That is they are player versus player, individual battles that have defined this era.
Yeah.
Whether it's Lyon versus Kohli or Cummins versus Kohli or Ashwin to Steve Smith. I mean, that will never happen again. Probably, I don't think it happened in India again either. So these are such fascinating competitions like between players, world-class players, which we should kind of also take a step back, even as journalists, and celebrate when they do happen over the next few weeks. But it also kind of puts into perspective where India-Australia has become as a rivalry, which is where we started this conversation in this video as well. And I do wonder, even for the modern Australian fans, I think the Ashes will always have the tradition and the history attached to it. So is it fair to say, Ben Horne, that when you talk about Ashes, you're still kind of looking back at what was? Whereas with Australia and India and that rivalry, it's more about looking at what is and what is to come, because this is the rivalry that just keeps growing and growing. And players play a lot with each other, like you said. I mean, just look at some of the young players in this team. Harshit Rana, like he was sort of mentored by Mitchell Starc in KKR in the IPL. Nitish Kumar Reddy, not many people in India had heard of him before he blossomed under Pat Cummins' captaincy. So there's so much of that happening, but it just adds layer after layer after layer to what I do strongly believe is the rivalry in world cricket right now.
Bharat, finally, do you have a prediction?
This is going on YouTube, right? So people in India will watch this as well. So I think it's in vogue to go 3-2. Like everybody you hear, including me on other stations, has gone and said 3-2. I think that would be a dreamy scenario. If it's 3-2, I think we are really in for a feast, and probably I will have another book to write with you, Benny Horne. But I do have a feeling if Australia win big early on, I'm not very confident about the bounce back ability of this Indian team. Look, they've surprised us before. They will surprise us again. But I do think that Australia have the momentum going into this series, even though they haven't played a test match in a while. Just looking at them, there's this energy about them. Whereas India is still trying to tick a few boxes. So if Australia win this test, you needed a prediction, I'm going to say 3-1 Australia. I think it's time the Border-Gavaskar Trophy came back to Australia. And I'm not saying this as an Australian. I'm just saying this as someone who's kind of just read the tea leaves at this point. But hey, we all know what happened 4 years ago. And hopefully something dramatic does happen and something really unexpected comes up.
Well, it's great to have you, Bharat.
What about your prediction, Benny?
Oh, sorry, I was trying to get away with not putting myself out there. Yeah, look, I think 4-1 to Australia.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, that will rely on it not raining in Sydney. But
yeah, true.
But I think Australia might be too dominant for India in this series. But there is that tinge of uncertainty in my mind because Australia, their batting has been a bit unconvincing for quite a while now as well. So I think we'll know a lot more after this test starts. And but I think there's probably a lot riding on Rishabh Pant, Virat Kohli to really carry that Indian batting. So it's going to be fascinating, and can't wait to talk to you, Bharat, through the test and through the series.
All I'll say is, now that you have said 4-1 and I have said 3-1, if India do end up winning this series, when they'll have those screenshots of Australian journalists, this is what they predicted, these idiots, and look what happened with the cricket eventually. Our faces will also be featured on that. So if you are someone who's going to watch this video 2 months later and decide to draw devil horns on both of us, good luck to you. But at this point, as of November 19th, the day that a lot of Indian fans want to forget, we both think Australia are favourites, but hey, we'll wait and watch.
All right, let's see what happens in Perth, and we'll see you during the test match.